Let's see if we cannot mess this one up. And as long as it sits where I want it, that's where it needs to be. It just fits up perfect. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. Today, as you can see, we're obviously back on the lightweight. Yes, our little series rock crawling project. And we're gonna make a bunch of parts and even make some of them wrong, because I am determined to get that 2 1/4 diesel that we started up in Ted's basement sitting in the lightweight. Now I know all of you are telling me that that is the worst possible choice we can put in this thing, and it definitely wouldn't turn the 35-inch tires. But I mean, come on, I own a bunch of Land Rovers, like a bunch of them. So I'm obviously into making the worst possible choices all the time. But terrible choices aside, I think it's time to start cleaning up that 2 1/4. I wonder how many years of dirt and gravel this is. That's good. That's a little better. Look at how clean that transmission is under there. Even all the CAD plating is still freaking good looking. Now we obviously have a bit to go on cleaning. It almost looks like this was like waxy oiled or something and then collected dirt over the years and then more layers of that. And just real thick in spots. But I just wanted to get the greasiest parts taken care of so that way when we're handling it, I don't make an entire mess of the place. But the engine is looking pretty decent as well, and we're just about ready to start tossing it into the lightweight. But before we do that, I got a couple seals shipped in from our buddies at Lucky 8 when we bought all the parts for Tommy's Disco. Before we put the transmission on, I want to take care of what looks to have been a pretty good rear main leak. I don't mind old Rovers dripping oil by any means, but this one looked to be a pretty massive ordeal, and we still have a little bit of cleaning in the bell housing to do. Just love me some diesel oil. I'd say there is a slight oil leak back there. It's so oily. Now, normally at this point, I would tear everything down, get everything clean, go through it. That's the typical fashion when you have an engine this far out. But this isn't the last engine that will be in the lightweight. Pretty much all of you guys have been dogging the 2 1/4 diesel pretty hard. I know, it's not the greatest, it's gonna be slow, but I really do want to experience like a period correct experience. I want to experience an experience. I want to have a period correct experience with this thing. I understand it's gonna be slow. We have other plans for something down the line, but at least for this summer, I think I'm gonna have a blast just putzing around with this guy. So pretty much all I want to do is kind of just freshen up some of the seals, gaskets, and get it somewhat tight. You keen people that are watching may have realized that I'm in fact as big an idiot as I always say I am. As soon as we pulled the flywheel off, I noticed I guess we can say a little bit of an issue. Our replacement rear main seal and what's on the engine are in fact quite different. It's my fault. I'm the problem. It's me. I don't know what, I was just in automatic mode. This frickin' guy. But I was just in automatic mode when I went to order parts and was thinking series truck. Obviously we'll have our typical series rear crank seal. Wrong. This is a 5-main bearing engine, which means the rear seal setup is different, and it's a Santana, which means it could be anything. So rear main seal won't get replaced right at this moment, which isn't a big deal because the engine will come back out before the final startup and everything anyways. So we'll continue on, we'll get the oil pan off, get our oil pan seal replaced, and get everything prepped for when I have the right one. I guess good news is I won't have to bolt the flywheel and the clutch back on, just the transmission, so we can mock everything up. Since we're this far in, I'm just gonna go ahead and get the dirty stuff out of the way. Because you guys know, diesel engine oil is kind of freaking annoying. It's black, it's forever black, it's a mess. We're gonna have to scrub the floor even though I'm trying to be clean. We gotta scrub the parking lot. Yeah. I'm just gonna whine. But I don't believe the oil pan is leaking, but you'll see why I'm pulling it off in just a second here. And right there's why I felt the oil pan had to come off. It is currently a low capacity version. It'd be real interesting to see what we decided to hit there. If you guys remember, that engine came out of this particular 109. Who knows, maybe that happened at the same time. But either way, we're gonna put it back to the high capacity version. I don't know if you heard that, but that was a motorcycle. I don't quite think it's that time of year yet. We'll go with that being a sufficient result. Tiny bit of divot there still, but that'll be fine, not affect anything. That took a little bit of force to get back out. That had to be a heck of a hit. They definitely felt that one. Try not to make any more of a mess than I already have here. So no new seal, but we can still pop this guy back on. We don't have to get too critical on tightening these guys up, because obviously it's coming back apart. So we can attempt to make it one piece now. You know, this grate is really convenient for stuff with wheels. You know, I'm sure you guys enjoy watching a guy struggle. Stay. So obviously with how the lightweight is sitting, we can't really get the engine and transmission swung in there. Kinda got a Maserati engine in the way. So once again, we'll play Move the Rovers around. I think I need a little bit more room. Good news is, I think I'm working on something on that front. I mean, we're not gonna move again or anything crazy like that, but we do need more real estate, that is for sure. This is crippling to progress. Just needed to use the jack to get it far enough away from the wall to get the dolly in on the other side. But much easier. See how well this works once we hit the grate. Much more room to play with, and being the lightweight has quite possibly the easiest body panels to remove that I've ever encountered. We're gonna get a bunch of stuff out of the way. We may have to do something a little different with this. Not sure. So we're gonna get the seat box out of the way. With that and the floor out of the way, we'll have plenty of room to address what's going on with the transmission crossmember. We have one that was custom made sitting in there for that TH350 GM transmission. And we'll have to go back to something a little more appropriate to fit our transmission and transfer case. That's not going to be all that big a deal. It appears most everything is still there, but we'll get a closer look once the seat box is out of the way. The major thing we have to address today is going to be the engine mounts. There is some stuff tacked on, welded on, that held that Buick V6. These series trucks are just so fun to work on. They're like adult Lego sets. We could just take everything apart, get it out of the way. Now look at all the room that is in there for us to figure out what we got going on. Now next up is the fenders. They're pretty much unbolted with the grill out of the way, so may as well just do 3 more bolts and not have to lean over these for anything. On this side, I guess what would be the driver's side fender, we have a little bit of wiring to contend with. This has a painless harness throughout it, which obviously isn't original by any means, but that is fine because we're not really going original with this guy, but we will do some cleaning up once we get the engine in here and pare this down, loom it up, make it look a little more finished. But it is a very good start to everything, and the previous owners got it pretty well sorted out, so I'm happy about that. Everything actually works, functions correctly. We'll make a little cover for this, pretty everything up, so there's no sense on this particular one wasting a ton of time changing that. But it is bolted to the fender, so we need to undo that. It's gonna probably just be cheapest to go through Discount Tire. But why are you, well, what do you mean? Where else would you get tires? They own Tire Rack, they own everything. But if I don't have a way to mount them, so. Man, we are just making money on this deal. So this exhaust won't work. It exits the wrong side. So we'll get that out of the way. We obviously like building exhaust around here, so that's not a problem. I'm pretty excited to put what is probably going to be one of the nicest exhausts on a series trucks. One end of this has to come out. There we go. Get the rest of it out of the way too. Now that everything's all cleared out of the way, before we go ahead and swing this conglomeration into place, we're gonna cut off the brackets that were welded on for that Buick V6. Those shouldn't be too bad to get out of there. Just a little slice with a zip disc, peel them off, grind everything smooth. That's roughly the location that the factory engine mount brackets are welded on to the chassis, so we need those cleared out. We'll probably also get this off because we won't be using that. And we're gonna unbolt the cross member that was made up for that TH350. Thankfully that was made to bolt in, so that's good. That'll be nice and easy, and it'll give us a good place to make a bolt-in one for the series transmission. So we just need to get this out of here, and then we can kind of just replicate the bolt pattern with a new piece of a little stronger tube. We're gonna have probably a nice chunk of 2" by 2" 3/16 wall square tube as our cross member. It's going to be nice and sturdy. That won't have a problem holding up and being sturdy for our transmission and transfer case. But on top of that, that'll give us a nice mounting point for some skid plates underneath. Because as you guys know, we're going to try and make this a awesome little off-road toy. As you guys know, I had quite a perspective change on what I wanted to do with this thing after we hung out with the guys with the cool series trucks out in Moab. So there is what was in there for a cross member. I mean, not terrible. It did the job, but we're gonna go ahead and make something a little bit nicer and something that has the mounts for our series transmission. What we went ahead and did is ran over to Ted's to look at the white one and take a few measurements just to see where everything sits on a factory frame. Ted's is a good known factory frame, hasn't been messed with, so we will go off of that. And on top of that, we also have the Nada laying around. So we have this one to reference as well, even though this is a 6-cylinder car. We have the transmission cross member that we can get our angles off of and the height and location that we need. So this will help out. But the first thing we're gonna do is get our bar made up. Then we can figure out exactly what to do with these guys. We'll make a couple plates. I wanna get the rear mounts locked in because then we can have the rear bolted in and supporting itself, and we can just kind of hang the engine into place and make up our front mounts. In all honesty, this shouldn't be too bad of a job to do. And it'll be nice going back to having mounts in the factory locations. So no matter what we throw in there, we can work off factory stuff. I want to go ahead and get everything chopped out of the way, do all the dirty work first, and then we can start building everything out. Trust me, there's nothing more fun than using an angle grinder and a zip disc. I'm not being sarcastic either. Now that all the brackets are off and the welds are cleaned off the frame rail, it's time to start actually building some stuff and getting this guy in there and hopefully not tripping. Lots of floor space. Watch out, Chet. You might trip. And what we're going to start with is the transmission cross member. We're essentially going to like replicate this just a little bit nicer and something that will actually accept this series transmission. And I don't want to say like this isn't nice. I guess just beefier. Beefier. We'll go with beefier. This did its job. We have our little side plates. Went ahead and cut those out on the bandsaw. We also cut these out on the bandsaw, which will be our transmission transfer case mount brackets. They'll sit right on top of that tube we're cutting, and we'll be able to set those at the same angle as the factory ones. And that'll be a nice beefy 1/4 inch plate holding everything in place. So this cross member that we're building will hold up a tiny bit better than the oil pan did, in case we bash it off some rocks. We're gonna use that 2x2 3/16 square tube as our base. It's gonna be nice and beefy, so we just need to get that cut out. You also see we have a bent piece here, a little test run. That's right, a little bit later, we're gonna use that CNC press brake for the first time on one of my projects. Hopefully we're gonna get that guy to work and do some fancy bending on the engine mounts. All right, now that we got that cut out, what we're gonna do here is weld on these little angle plates at the end. So we can just copy our bolt pattern off the existing cross member that they had and transfer that over to this. And what these little plates do is make up the gap for the width of the bracket. So the series already has some bolt-on brackets welded onto the bottom, and they are just under 2.5 inches wide on the inside here. So on top of our 2-inch tube, we are going to put 2 3/16 inch plates on the outside here. That'll get everything the correct width, along with a little more strength at the bolt location. Then once these are welded on, we'll slice the bottom of the tube at an angle there to match what's going on. Just for when we boat side this, that angle matches closer to what is already there. Use another plate to make sure this is flush with the top. Throw a tack on this. So this is what we're going for here. Just kind of slice the bottom of the tube to match the angle of those plates. So we just have to match the other side. Bottoms are all welded up now, and that is one complete unit. We just need to get some holes in for the side here, and what we'll do for that is just swing this in and clamp it right into place instead of measuring stuff out. We can just trace the holes and just be nice and accurate. And we'll also mark where the frame rail sits, because then we can weld on the brackets for the mounts. So now we just need to get a few measurements off the NADA cross member. The brackets are centered in between the frame rails, so we just need to get our distance, and we're 21 5/8. So 21 5/8. Then we need what angle it sits at, which is easier said than done because there's a frame in the way. 162, so we're about 18 degrees. Welded one of the brackets up. We're just gonna make sure my math was right. And we are good. We'll get the other side welded. I think we got them laid out. We'll just double check that we are good. So there is the finished cross member. Got it all welded out. That should do sufficiently. Little comparo compared to what was in there. Comparo compared to. I'm just a wordsmith. But we'll get this guy bolted into place. Then we can mount up the rear and get that locked down, and we'll be able to swing the engine and take a few more measurements off the nada and come up with some brackets for that. Those are gonna be fun. We're gonna get to use the press brake. Pretty excited about that. Chet's excited to go home. Still slightly warm. Well, it at least looks the part in there. From here, it looks like it may actually work. We'll get the old 2 1/4 into the air and then swing it in and see where we stand. A little slower next time, Joe. We'll get the rest of the transmission tunnel out of the way. That way we can swing it in with everything assembled. Getting close. We're close. We're gonna get the engine hoist out of the way here because the way I have it chained up, I can't go far enough back before hitting the bulkhead. I kind of put myself into a little predicament, but we'll get it sorted out. With the way I had it on the engine hoist, I didn't have enough to swing it in. I probably should have just removed the bumper. But we're just about lined up, so right. I think we have it sitting pretty close to where I want it. Now we can start measuring and cutting out a piece for this side. I think we'll start with the driver's side one and get that kind of locked down. Then we can tweak the level a little bit and everything and make it all happy. But I think where it's sitting now is pretty close to where I want it. In case we ever need to hand crank it, we got that all lined up. Transmission's sitting pretty happy right there. This one's a little interesting to deal with. This is probably like the 4th, 5th, 6th motor that's been in it. I guess it'd be an engine, not a motor. But it obviously had a 4-cylinder of some sort to start off with when it left the factory. Then before the last gentleman got his hands on it, it had a Rover V8 in it. Then the last gentleman put that Buick V6 in it. So it's been touched and breathed on quite a bit. So we don't have a whole lot of factory stuff left in this area, but that's all right. We got some measurements off of Ted's, and as long as it sits where I want it, that's where it needs to be. This driver's side one shouldn't be too terrible to do. We just are going to have a flat plate with an angle. We'll make that out of 1/4 inch, and then we'll make some 1/8 inch side supports. So the factory bracket is all out of like 1/8 inch, maybe even a little thinner. So this will be quite a bit beefier. And the 4-cylinder ones on the lightweights come off right at about this level. So I think we have it sitting at the right height. And if we look at it, it's sitting pretty decent from the side here. So we'll just hold our bracket up into place and get a distance. And we're about 3 3/4. So from the frame to this bolt is 3 3/4. Then we need to measure this angle and the distance down to this bolt. So we're gonna cut something out, drill this hole, and use our press brake to bend that piece. So here's our top plate all cut out. We went ahead and drilled our holes. It's got 3, even though there's 2 bolts, but that middle one is to account for the stud on the rubber mount itself. If you can see there, it protrudes through, so we needed space to account for that. We got everything measured out, 3 different size holes, one to get plenty of clearance for that stud, the correct size hole for this bolt, and then we went slightly oversized for this one, so we have a little adjustment in case it isn't 100% perfect. We also laid out our bend line. We're getting to the part I'm super excited about, so we just need to measure what that bend needs to be, and we are gonna bend that at 33 degrees. So this hit on the press brake at 33 degrees. And while we're using the press brake, I went ahead and made up our passenger side mount. So this is a little different shape, almost like a bat wing. And to make that, I used a paper template. And that is because I didn't want to do math. So we don't know exactly where we're going to be height-wise until we lock the other side in, but that doesn't matter. We just need the left to right because when we go to weld this in, we can slide it up and down. But what I wanted to do was match our angle that we need. We're going to bend these wings down a shape, something like so, and our passenger side mount will go right on top of that. We just need to mark out where to bend on the steel plate itself, and I'm going to sacrifice this piece to do that. So our bend lines are right at the fold, so I'm just going to cut right at the fold to make it easier to trace it on. So there's where we need to bend that particular one. And to mark out that hole through the template, earlier I just punched right through the paper. Roll that out, easy peasy. Let's go over to the machine shop side and bend some stuff. I'm pretty excited to see if we can actually get that Langmuir press brake to work. It's been an utter disappointment so far. So that test piece I showed earlier is what we used to calibrate the bend profile for this piece. So that is all set up. This should bend at a 90-degree angle. When this thing works, it is actually pretty neat. So we just have our standard dies put in on what we're using, the type of material we're using, thickness, width, and the angle we want to bend at. And to calibrate it, we just go in and bend it, and then after the bend, we measure it. So that particular one bent 5.5 degrees shy of 90. So to dial it in, all we have to do is click overbent or underbent and put the degrees, and then it nails it, and we get the perfect 90-degree bend. So that one will be easy, but we need to do our other one. Name it quick. We'll probably delete that out anyways at some point, but we got the standard 88 goose. Go down, we're gonna use the 1.969 opening on the V. We have a 4-way die, so we can flip this around with 4 different bends, and you're gonna use that depending on the material thickness. For the proper bend, you kind of want 8 times the material thickness. So for 1/4 inch, you want a 2-inch opening, which is what this is. Then we have stuff for thinner metal as well. We have another chunk down there to make up the entire 32-inch opening, along with enough of the gooseneck dies to do that as well. And this has the gooseneck dies to where if we have a tight bend and we bend the second bend, it gives it a little relief before it hits the face of that. If you don't have that relief, you get something like this after you're trying to bend, and just kind of bend itself back out. So then we end up with this little bend in the middle, 0.25 for thickness. Bend width is 2.75 inches. Well, we should probably put what I said, 2.75, okay. That's gonna do 2.7, all right. And then we're gonna go 33 degrees. We'll probably have to adjust that. What we'll do is we're gonna cheat the system here. We're gonna go 35. It underbent the other one about 5.5 degrees on 90, so extra 2 degrees should get us close. Hot rolled steel, save. We'll do the passenger side mount first. And for the first bend of the move, we need to use our little safety hand things to get the plate down to its clamping position. Not the plate, the punch. And that's just 2 buttons. So you have to have both hands, and it gets us down to where we are less likely to bend our fingers in half, which with me, that is probably a good thing because I can't even keep my hand off a hot coffee pot. This stuff is designed for people like me. Then we're just gonna line this up by eye because we have the mark. This does have the CNC back gauge. If we're doing like a production run, it will automatically set the depth of the bend, and we can also do multiple bends. So if this has like 3 bends in a part, it would just knock them out on each one. We would just reposition the part for each one. And if it's at a different depth, it would automatically move that back gauge to where it needs to be. Essentially what I'm saying is if this thing actually ever reliably works, it's gonna be an awesome tool to have around here. It hasn't so far, but that's the way some things go. I'll give it a chance. Then when we're ready, it's just a double tap. It's gonna bend, and it starts bending it. We'll make sure it's square. And I'm actually wrong on that. We need to flip it. We want it this way. I'll show you why here in a second. This is where the gooseneck die comes into place. If we were to bend that without the gooseneck die, and it was just a straight punch, that tab would have ran right into that and it would have tweaked it all funky. But look at that. How freaking cool is that piece? Countdown. And of course the thing frickin' messed up. It just frickin' that part up. That's sweet. Nice, so we'll go recut this because that might be my fault though. I should have ran that dry. Let's see here. I might have did this wrong. We might want that at 145. See, I've never bent anything besides a 90 on this thing so far. So we're gonna run it dry. Let's see how far down it goes. Yeah, that was my fault. Son of a gun. We needed what the final part would be, not that I wanted it to bend at 35 degrees. I wanted it to come out at 145. So essentially 180 minus the 35. I guess that's how you learn. Just whipped out another one real quick here. Let's see if we can not mess this one up. I mean, at least this was my fault. I would have been really kind of annoyed if this thing wasn't working after all the trouble we went through troubleshooting. That looks slightly better. Check what we got. And we are 150. So we need to dial that in. So it is underbent by 3 degrees. See, I went back to 33 degrees or 147. I should have just left it at 145. Run program, yes. Line this guy back up. All right, so we should be good now. Let's check it. Got the top hole lined up, bottom hole lined up, and we are frickin' dialed on our angle. Man, when this thing actually works, it's kind of the frickin' cat's meow. I'm super stoked about this. The thing's gonna be pretty fun. We have some stuff coming in the future that may be interesting for you guys, some solutions. So let's see if our measurements ended up correct here. Slide it in, and that looks pretty frickin' money. We just need to make a couple side braces. So our side pieces are just gonna be out of 1/8 inch material. That on top of this 1/4 inch top plate will be plenty sufficient. Like I said, the factory ones are like 1/8 or a little less. And it's just gonna be a profile, something like that. We just need it to come 90 off this backside because this plate sits 90 or perpendicular off the frame rail. Mark it out with our square. Then we'll make sure that's square off the line, and then just trace this. We're gonna go to that point. From there, we're just gonna cut a straight line across the bottom. All right, so that'll be our side brace. We'll cut this out, flip it over, mirror it, cut that one out. And those are pretty dialed in there. That should look nice and give it a ton of strength. I am super pleased at how both those turned out. It just fits up perfect to the mount. We have it all welded up inside and out. So we are ready to swing these guys into place. Tack them up, and then the 2 1/4 will be suspended on its own weight. I have a ratchet strap pulling the engine tight just to pinch everything into place. But man, does it look proper in there. Take this back out. Make sure we're happy with how it's sitting. I think everything looks pretty good. Check the back here so we can swing our other side into place. And that looks like it lines up pretty nice. All right, let's drop the jack and put this under its own weight. Man, does that sure look proper in there. Super excited to have a Rover 4-cylinder back in this guy. I mean, as much as I love V8s and all that goodness, I definitely wasn't in love with the Buick V6. This platform is what the lightweight needs, in my opinion. Both mounts are tacked in. We're not going to fully weld them out until the engine comes back out, and it is going to come back out. We obviously need to do that rear main seal whenever we get it, but I also want to strip most of this gunk off the chassis at some point, do a little modification back here, and just make sure all that is sorted out. So everything will come off, the rest of the body, the engine and transmission again. But I do want to tackle just a few projects to make sure we have all the fabrication taken care of before we do that. I don't want to refinish the chassis and then have to go start welding on it again. So we're going to make sure we have all our auxiliary stuff for the engine sorted out, our cooling setup. I also need to address the fuel tank. What do you guys think on that? When I got it, it had this fuel cell sitting in the back here. I do not want to do that. I think I want to go back to the factory location, but that also means we have to modify the seats that are put in this because it is not a flip-up seat anymore. But I think the right move is to go back to flip-up seats, have the proper fill underneath the seat, like all the lightweights came with from the factory. As you see, unlike the normal series stuff, there is not a fuel fill. It was all done right here. On the military ones, I believe there was an option of having a auxiliary fuel tank for a dual fuel tank setup. I don't think I want to do that. I want to keep this as simple as possible, but I also don't want the fuel tank hanging below this rocker. We're gonna make this into our rock slider. This passenger side, the fuel tank was cut apart and the battery was mounted in there. I think being we're back with the 4-cylinder, the battery might go back up front. Try and keep some more of the weight up front so this guy can climb. But if you see, the factory tank hangs quite a bit below the rocker. So I think we're gonna make our own tank on the driver's side to sit underneath here. But to get some capacity back, we'll probably have to modify this outrigger and delete most of it and make an L-shaped tank and have the tank come up to this bulkhead mount outrigger. But what do you guys think? I'm not quite sure, but that's gonna be our next step, along with getting the wiring and the intake and exhaust sorted out. And then we can fire this guy up. And now that we have the engine and transmission in, we can sort through the pile of drive shafts that we have and see if we have any that work. And I think it's also time to start figuring out the axle stuff. I just wanted to get it this far before we sent off the money for those, but man, does it look good. Getting the engine set in there and all lined up took a little bit longer than I was expecting. Some of that is because I'm an idiot and I don't know my degrees and I have to redo parts. But I am happy it is in there, and I'm even more happy that that CNC press brake finally did something productive for us here. And the reason why I wanted to get that press brake sorted out, because the next step on the LR4 truck is making some toolboxes, and we need that thing to work to make those toolboxes. I'm not sure if that'll be the next video or if we'll have more on the lightweight, but we will see you next week with some more Rover projects. I appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing. Man, should have had a V8, but this is just too right, even though everyone tells me it's the worst engine I could possibly put in there. Glutton for punishment. I really wish these BFGs that are on here were in better shape. They got so much tread, but look at all the cracks. They're just weathered out. Man, they're just so old. It's almost something as old as Dari would drive around on.